We start here in the Chinese capital, where the government has released a report on the country's governance model, calling it a people's democracy that works. Officials held a news conference Saturday morning outlining details.
The White Paper is an important document that gives a systemic overview of China's democracy, including the value, the concept, the institutions, the system, participation practices, achievements and contributions. The White Paper points out that China's whole process people's democracy has integrated process-oriented democracy with results-oriented democracy, procedural democracy with substantive democracy, direct democracy with indirect democracy, and people's democracy with the will of the state. It is a model of socialist democracy that covers all aspects of the democratic process and all sectors of society. It is a true democracy that works.
This white paper says China's political system is led by the Communist Party of China and that it responds to the people and is run by the people, either through direct or indirect elections at local levels. Well, with more, our reporter Yang Shangshang was at that news conference this morning, so let's check in with her in Beijing. So Shangshang, what more can you tell us?
Yes, actually, this white paper has over 50 pages, and it's just trying to answer one question, how Chinese democracy works. And I have a few highlights to share with you. First highlight is that this white paper explained China's democracy concept. That is whole process people's democracy. And this democracy is developed and led by Chinese Communist Party. And the essence of people's democracy is people's status as the master of the nation. And second highlight is that this white paper spent pages to explain China's democratic institutional framework, as well as some concrete and pragmatic practices. For example, it just explained the Chinese institutions like NPC and CPPCC, how they work together to complete whole democratic procedures. Actually, this whole system avoids some weak points faced by some Western countries. It also points out that democracy actually is not a democratic decoration, but actually really solves the concerns of the people in the nation. Well, the third highlight is that this white paper says democracy belongs to and developed by the people in every nation, not a privilege of a few nations. Whether a country should be seen as democratic or not should not be judged by the outsiders, but by its own people. And the fourth highlight is that it just says that China's democracy is thriving with other nations in the history of the world civilization. China is ready to contribute its wisdom, experience, and strength to the global political progress through mutual learning and cooperation. Back to you.
All right, Yang Shangshang live for us in Beijing. Thank you. Well, let's continue this conversation with our current affairs commentator, Einar Tangen, who joins us now in the studio. So, what are some of the big takeaways from this white paper, and why is China releasing this now?
Well, I mean, the Summit for Democracy that Biden is holding is obviously one of the catalysts. This is not something new. I mean, they've been talking about whole process democracy. There was a major speech in 2019. So at this point, China is trying to showcase that it has 40 years of success representing its people. That's about a representative process and results, rather than just looking at it as a process.
And it calls it a whole process people's democracy. Help us understand, what does that mean?
Well, I mean, people are going to have a little hard time getting their head around that, but it very simply, what it means is that China is interested in actually representing the different segments of society. They're not going to rely purely on an election process to do that. If you look up the makeup of the different countries, whether it's the U.S. or Europe, you tend to see very wealthy people from certain areas of commerce, law, etc., overrepresented, whereas the common people are underrepresented. That's not true in the Chinese system because they apportion these things. Remember, there's 92 million party members and they represent everything from street cleaners to people, professionals. So everyone is represented.
Officials this morning also took some time to question and criticize the U.S.'s political system, so let's listen to that for a quick moment.
The United States calls itself a democratic leader and organises and manipulates the so-called US Summit for Democracy. It actually uses democracy as a guise to suppress and contain countries with different social systems and different development models, and cover its own undemocratic moves. This will be a joke in the history of democracy and is destined to be unpopular.
Certainly, I think a lot of people in Washington would disagree with that. What's your take?
Okay, so I mean, China is highlighting the fact that they believe that it's always about results, and that you have to. This is not. It's about pleasing and taking care of your own people. China has an over 97% approval ranking after COVID-19 handling by its people in terms of confidence in the central government. That's versus 25% in the U.S. So there's a real sharp contrast. For the last 40 years, the U.S. has experienced kind of sideways motions when it comes to its economy, to the actual wages that are paid to people, and there's a lot of dissatisfaction. You can see it. Not only in the massive amounts of anger, but the social and political divisions that are happening there. You don't see the same thing in China, and this is what China is trying to get. It's not about ideological lynch mobs trying to force you to please them because their systems aren't working. It is really about the people of China.
All right, Einar Tangen, thanks so much for your perspective. We appreciate it.